Hi, our group number is 7 and our country is Brazil. In this presentation, we're going to talk about things you need to consider to launch a product or do a business in Brazil. We're going to talk about some marketing factors that will influence the launch of the product. We're also going to talk about some cultural difference between the US and Brazil. And we're going to highlight the best concepts that will allow us to do the best business in Brazil.
In 6 parts, Professor Hapsig's cultural dimension theory shows how different cultures affect society. This study analyzes how groups from different cultures differ in their values, behaviors, personalities, and qualities. In Brazil, people believe in hierarchy with a power distance score of 6 to 9. Those with more power benefit more. In the United States, with a score of 40, believes in equality and justice for everyone. On individualism, Brazil scored 36 and the United States scored 60. Brazil focused on being together, family, and loyalty, and the United States values individuality and expertise. This affects how people communicate and build trust in business. Understanding these cultural differences helps navigate variations in values, behaviors, and lastly, communication styles among diverse cultural groups.
Let's talk about the communication and scheduling culture within Brazil as well as the United States. Brazil is neither a low context nor high context. They are found somewhere in the middle, whereas the United States is a low context communication culture. They prefer very clear, precise communication. So when you're communicating in Brazil, it's important to take note of the verbal and nonverbal cues and to follow up on written correspondence with a visit or even a phone call for best practices. Looking at the evaluating and disagreeing culture, Brazil leans towards more of the indirect forms, whereas the United States leans a little bit more towards direct forms. So when providing feedback, it's important to use more of an indirect approach and go for a non-confrontational style. Don't be too direct. Brazil favors a heavily flexible schedule. United States is the opposite. They prefer a very linear schedule. So tasks are approached in a more fluid manner and they value adaptability over organization. So make sure you plan for flexibility when making appointments and focus on the relationship over deadlines.
So I'm going to be discussing some negotiation style and strategies for bargaining. So the first is attitudinal bargaining, which is something that is used by the Brazilians. They try to appeal to personal relationships or even try to guilt you. So this is something to be aware of, but it can also be used by you as well. The Brazilians are a very group-oriented culture, so this can also be a tactic that would work for them. Deceptive tactics are ones that are needed to be watched out for. The Brazilians tend to try to mislead you or even lie about certain facts. So it's important to have your facts straight beforehand and never call them out on it as to try not to offend them. Brazilians tend to focus a lot more on power and status instead of money. So when appropriate, focus on these things instead, because these things are more important in certain cases. As Bailey said earlier, avoid direct and confrontational language to avoid offending them. They're a very non-direct and non-confrontational society, so you don't want to alienate them. Using respectful language and appropriate titles goes a long ways as well. They like the respect that you give them, and first names should not be used unless told to use them. And then deals may take several meetings, so it's important to be patient and to understand that some bargains are concluded with a handshake, which is just as good as a signed document.
Okay. Officially called the Federative Republic of Brazil, Brazil's current constitution was ratified in 1988. Much like the United States, the federal government consists of three branches: the executive, the legislative, and the judicial. The president, after elected, serves for 4 years, but no more than 2 consecutive terms. But he can be or she can be elected again after one election period. The elected senators serve for 8 years, and the House delegates serve for 4 years. There are 26 states within Brazil, each with its own government structure, laws, and courts. Between the federal government and states, the federal law and courts are superior. There are multiple political parties in Brazil. Let's see, the Liberal Party and the Workers' Party are the largest. Smaller parties align themselves with larger parties during elections. During the 2022 presidential election, it was contested by incumbent President Bolsonaro, with claims that the election voting machines were rigged. President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva was elected by 1 percentage point over the incumbent President Bolsonaro. Lastly, leading up to the election, 2 Liberal Party members were killed by federal police. There was also a bomb scare prior to President da Silva's inauguration, and a storming of the Capitol by the Worker Party members after the inauguration.
The Index of Economic Freedom, or the Economic Freedom Index, was created in 1995 by the Heritage Foundation and the Wall Street Journal. It is an annual ranking that originally consisted of 177 nations. The overall world average score of 2023 was 59.3%, and Brazil had an overall score of 53.5%. Meaning that both Brazil and the world average fall into the category of mostly unfree. That category ranges from 50 to 59.9. In the index, you have 4 major categories. They're the rule of law, government size, regulatory efficiency, and market openness. Overall, Brazil and the world average are neck and neck in terms of rating. Fiscal health is your biggest difference, with the world having 54.8 and Brazil having a 2.7. The biggest 3 issues I see are fiscal health, financial freedom, and then the biggest one is government integrity. To make any changes, you first have to root out the corruption in the government. But once that's done, you would have Brazil start rising the rates of the index of the economic freedom and climb out of the mostly unfree sector.
Starting a new business in Brazil is not going to be the easiest endeavor. The World Bank gives the country, Brazil, a score of 59.1. This is due to the lengthy and at times complicated process. One can expect the registration and licensing of the business to go rather quickly, averaging around 11 days. However, as far as construction and permits are concerned, it will take an average of 384 days. This process is complicated further by potential legal or language barriers. Brazil has a very specific process of tasks that must be done to ensure that everything is done according to the laws and procedures set up by the government. The tax rate can also be hefty in Brazil. Depending on the state, the total taxation rate can be up to 64.7% of the profit. This rate varies depending on where your business is located. Contract enforcement also can take some time, averaging 731 days throughout the process. The World Bank gives their justice system a score of 69.4. This indicates that while the system usually works in the favor of the businesses, it's never going to be a guarantee. In summary, starting a business in Brazil can be expensive, costly, and extensive, which is why it's important to understand what you're doing. Hiring a lawyer and possibly a partner who has experience in Brazil will greatly decrease the complications and aid in your tricky venture.
MFN stands for the most favored nation. When you are a World Trade Organization nation, it means that if you provide a concession to one member of the World Trade Organization, then you must give it to all members of the World Trade Organization. However, it doesn't mean that the other country must reciprocate with you. Some exceptions include discriminating against imports outside of a trade bloc or giving preferential treatment to a developing country. Import tariffs are higher for agricultural products at 12.5% versus non-agricultural products at 11.6%. The export fees may be less than the import fees depending on the product that we choose to produce. Brazil has free trade agreements with the Mercosur trading bloc, the United States, and the European Union. In conclusion, it would be helpful for us to make our product in a country with which Brazil has a free trade agreement.
In recent years, Brazil has made improved changes in laws and processes to make foreign direct investments more enticing. They have created new laws that reduce border bureaucracy, improved regulatory processes, and emphasize ethical practices. Brazil is particularly interested in innovation in certain energy, transportation, and life sciences sectors, incentivizing investments with tax exemptions and low-cost financing. And yet, in other sectors, the Brazilian government wants to still regulate certain aspects. Overall, Brazil has made improvements to laws to attract FDIs, but they could make additional improvements.
Looking at current and past economic conditions is important when a company considers entering a new or a different market. Looking at the data for Brazil, something to seriously consider is their inflation rates and their lending interest rate percentages. When a business launches a new venture or product, companies often need to borrow money. Brazil's lending interest rate is significantly higher than many other countries and has been on a steady rise over the last 3 years. The 2022 lending interest rate was nearly 40%, which was a nearly 10% increase from the year before. These rates would decrease a business's borrowing power as payments back to the lender would be high. We would also want to consider the high inflation rate. Inflation makes everything more expensive, including labor, production, and product selling prices. These would need to be raised to compensate for the reduction in buying power. Inflation often makes it difficult for the average person to buy things that are not considered necessities. And if our business does not sell something that is considered a necessity, we might struggle to sell these items.
The Brazilian real, also known as the BRL, was introduced in 1994, stabilizing the economy and shaping the financial landscape of Brazil. Currently standing just below 5-1 against the US dollar, recent fluctuations, notably the significant decline in 2020 due to the global impact of COVID-19, highlight the currency's volatility. The inverse correlation between the BRL and inflation rates in Brazil is crucial for our business, as the currency tends to depreciate during rising inflation. Our strategy should be proactive, incorporating measures like monitoring economic indicators, adjusting pricing models, exploring local sourcing, and implementing effective risk management to navigate currency fluctuations and inflation's impact on product pricing in the Brazilian market.
Based on our research and understanding of the Brazilian market, we think that these 3 products would very well. Our first product is an air fryer that is differentiated from the basic model that is sold there and would include features that crisp, broil, bake, roast, dehydrate, reheat, and rotisserie. By adding these features, we would outshine the competition and appeal to those who want to save counter space and improve efficiency by combining several appliances into one. The next product that we think would do well is an ice cream maker that not only makes ice cream, but also makes popsicles and has different spouts for creating different designs. These features are not available on any other machines that are sold in Brazil and would give us at least a temporary advantage over the competition. And our last product is peanut butter. This product is not currently sold in Brazil and would fill an unmet need within this country. We could create a new brand, partner with an already established brand, or create a new flavor, such as one that includes acai berries. All of these products would fulfill an unmet need or underserved market and would appeal to this culture's sense of value and purpose. Thank you so much for watching our presentation.